This is Tom Duty, middle-aged American, living in New Jersey near the Lincoln Tunnel. If you were to visit my website, you would type Howdy Doody into Google. You'll find the correct spelling of the famous puppet. You then combine Tom Duty in a Google search for my site. I'll be reading from Time Magazine, November 12th, 2014, by Alexandra Sifferlin. Why Schools Can't Teach Sex. In spring of 2014, parents in the normally progressive area of Fremont, California, started a campaign to get a book removed from the ninth grade curriculum for the 5 district high schools. Arguing it was inappropriate for their 13 and 14-year-olds, they hired a lawyer, put together a petition with more than 2,500 signatures. Their target, Your Health Today, a sex ed book published by McGraw Hill. It offers a traditional advice and awkward diagrams, plus some considerably more modern tips. A how-to for asking partners if they've been tested for STDs. A debate on legalization of prostitution. And then there's this. 1. Kind of sex game is bondage and discipline, in which restriction of movement using handcuffs or ropes, or sensory deprivation using blindfolds or masks, is employed for sexual enjoyment. Most sex games are safe and harmless, but both partners need to openly discuss and agree beforehand on what they are comfortable doing. I was just astounded, says Fremont mom Teri Topham. My daughter is 13. She needs to know how boys feel. And frankly, I don't want her debating with other 13-year-olds on how well the adult film industry is practicing safe sex. Another parent, Asfia Ahmed, who has 8 and 9 grade boys, adds, it's assumed the audience is already drinking alcohol, already doing drugs, already having multiple sexual partners. Even if they are experimenting at this age, it says typical sexual behaviors. Even if they are experimenting at this age, it says atypical sexual behaviors are normal. 15,000 but school board members contend that ninth grade students already have been exposed to the contents of the book and much, much more. They argue that even relatively modern sex ed hasn't even begun to reckon with what kinds of things our kids are now exposed to in person and online. The singer Rihanna, for example, has legions of young fans. Her music video for the song S&M viewed more than 57 million times on YouTube so far, shows the artist pig-tied and writhing, cooing, chains, whips excite me. And then it cuts to her using a whip on men and women who have their mouth covered with duct tape. I think denying that sex is part of our culture in 2014 is really not serving our kids well, says Lara Calvert-York, president of Fremont School Board, who argues the kids are already seeing hyper-sexualized content on TV after school. So let's have a frank conversation about what these things are and that what kids need to talk about, she says. And let's do it in a classroom setting with highly qualified, credentialed teachers who know how to have conversations because lots of parents don't know how to have that conversation when they're sitting next to their kid and it comes up on a TV show. Everyone is feeling a little awkward. But the Fremont parents aren't budging. Any good parent monitors what the child has access to, says Topham. We don't say they're going to drink anyways, so let's give them a car with bigger airbags. The parents note that the book was actually written for college students, refers to college related activities like bar crawls, while acknowledging this book's author, Sara L. Mackenzie, believes it's appropriate for high schoolers. Her children read it at 13. The book has been shelved, at least for this year, but the parents' problem isn't going away. The Fremont crackdown showdown. The Fremont showdown is a local skirmish in what has become a complicated and exhausting battle that schools and parents are facing across the nation. How, when, and what to tell kids about sex today. Time reviewed the leading research on the subject as well as currently available resources to produce the information that follows, as well as specific guides to how and when to talk to kids on individual topics. The average American young person spends over 7 hours a day on media devices, often using multiple systems at once. Studies show that more than 75% of primetime TV shows contain sexual content. And the mention of sex on TV can occur up to 8 to 10 times in a single hour. And that's the soft stuff. A national sample study of 1,500 10 to 17-year-olds show that about half of those has used the internet have been exposed to online porn in the recent year. Oh, about 50, I missed the half. About 50%. Anyways, there was a study. There's a sample of whatever size. These are 10 to 17-year-olds. These are puberty age to nearly adult. And half of them have seen porn online. How do you learn appropriateness and content in a culture where Beyonce's song about pleasuring a guy in a car, championed by some as feminists and others as lewd, or where Robin Thicke's blurred lines can refer to violent sex acts in a music video viewed on the web more than 36 million times. Or where a major news story, it becomes apparent that wholesome girls from teen adventure movies send naked photos, or where primetime TV shows, the kind you often watch with your family, not frequently make reference to anal sex. 80. Uncensored media is not harmless. Longitudinal studies suggest exposure to sexual content on TV and other media in early adolescence is linked to double the risk of early sexual intercourse, and young people whose parents limit their TV time and less likely to partake in sexual behavior. Other studies have found that 10% of young women who had their first sexual experience in their teenage years say it was not their choice. And the younger they were, the more likely this was the case. While the vast majority of primetime programming contains sexual content, only 14% of sexual incidents measure the risk or responsibilities associated with sexual activity, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics. And that's just the media teenagers consume. There's a amazed by the other ways they use tools of communication. I was sexting and sending pictures to a guy older than me because he told me he loved me and I believed him and he showed everyone the picture. And I had everyone asking me for photos and making fun of it. And they called me a slut. Me and my girlfriend have been dating for almost a year, 2 months. She sent me naked pics of her and she asked me to send me some naked, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to lose her either. My girlfriend will text me good morning. If I don't respond right away, she will send me a question mark with a question mark, then a few more question marks, then call me. If I don't respond, she gets upset, angry. Is it abuse? What do I do? Young people now engage in relationships increasingly via technology, which means they're able to connect in a variety of ways and speed and frequency not known to prior generations. They also appear to be more comfortable young people now engage they also appear to be more comfortable showing skin. 2014 survey published by the journal Pediatrics, over 1,000 early middle school students found 20% reported receiving sexually explicit cell phone text or pictures. More colloquial, 5% report sending them. 20% get them, 5 send them. While many people think that explaining the consequences of sending out sexual images will get teens to stop, they may be missing the point. There's a pressure that people feel to send a sext as a digital currency of trust, says Emily Weinstein, a Harvard University doctoral student who collected the text above from an online forum run by MTV for a study on the digital stress of adolescence. It's a way to say someone here is a thing that could destroy me. I trust you won't use it. On paper, the United States is checking all the right boxes for managing teen sexual behavior. The national pregnancy rate is at a record low, and it appears teens are waiting longer to have sex, and those that are sexually active are using birth control more than previous years. But these numbers only tell a tiny snippet of the story. Sex education in the U.S. has only gotten worse, says Victor Strasburger, an adolescent medicine expert and distinguished professor of pediatrics at the University of New Mexico School of Medicine. Most of the time, we don't talk about contraception. They don't talk about risk of pregnancies, STIs, sexually transmitted infections. Certainly not abortion. At some point, you think adults would come to their senses and say, we have to counteract this. Strasburger says the U.S. school shouldn't base success on the teen pregnancy numbers. Everyone else's teen pregnancy rate has gone down too, but we pat ourselves on the back. We should acknowledge that we still have the highest rate in the Western world. Not only does sex education still virtually not exist in some areas of the country, but school programs that do teach kids about what used to be called the facts of life start too late. A recent CDC study showed that among teenagers 15 to 17 who have had sex, nearly 80% did not receive any formal education before they lost their virginity. Or if they did, it was only to discourage them from being sexually active. Parents and legislators failed to understand that although they may favor abstinence only sex education, despite the lack of any evidence of effectiveness, the media are decidedly not abstinence only, reads a 2010 American Academy Pediatric Policy Statement. I had sex with my older boyfriend at 16, says Ashley Jones, 22, a young Georgia woman. Suddenly, my dad wanted to talk about the birds and the bees. I was like, what? It's too late. The Kinsey Institute put the average age that kids have first had sex at 16.9, boys 17.4. No, 69 for boys and 17.4 for girls. Current sex education, where it does exist, often teaches the basic plumbing, but not answering the questions young people have when it comes to sexuality. What should I do when my girlfriend, boyfriend is pressuring me to have sex? What on earth was happening in that video? I probably shouldn't have clicked online. What do I do when my best friend tells me he or she is gay, or I think I'm gay? School-wide sex education largely ignores gay men and women. I think the internet is one of the most commonly used sources for LGBT folks to gain information, says Adrian Nava, 19, who says his question about same-sex relationships in this Colorado high school sex ed class was shot down by the teacher. In some ways, it's great because online forums tend to be supportive and positive, but there's so much misinformation that reinforces negative feelings. Sex ed courses tends to hyper focus on the girls. Girls are the ones who have babies, says Victoria Jennings, director of Institute of Reproductive Health, Georgetown University, whose research has shown there are globally more programs developed to help young women navigate their sexuality than to help boys. Given the fact that recent CDC literature shows 43.9% of women have experienced some form of unwanted sexual violence, was not rape, that was not rape, and 23.4 of men had experienced the same. Public health experts agreed both sexes need to educate on appropriate behavior. It doesn't help that the two groups are getting quite different messages. The way we talk to boys is antiquated and stereotypical, says Rosalind Wiseman, educator and author of Queen Bees and Wannabes, about teen girls and masterminds and wingmen boys. There's an assumption that these insensitive, sex crazed, hormone crazed, it's no surprise that so many boys disengage from so many conversations about sex ed. We teach girls how to protect themselves, adds Weiserman, and their rights to say yes or no to sexual behaviors. But we don't teach boys the complexity of these situations or that they're part of the conversation. We talk to them about sound bites. No means no. Well, of course it does, but it's literally confusing when you're a 15-year-old boy, you're interacting with girls, you're trying out their sexuality, she adds. Data shows that boys are less likely than girls to talk to their parents about birth control. How to say no to sex when 46% of sexually experienced teen boys do not receive formal instruction about contraception before they first have sex, compared to 33% of teen girls. Yet, completely reshaping the sex education landscape is currently almost impossible. Not just because disagreements like the one in front of Fremont schools in California, but because schools lack resources that historically large funding for abstinence only education, but supporters comprehensive sex education, which deals with contraception, sexually transmitted diseases, and relationships, faces significant logical financial barriers. Only 22 states and the District of Columbia require public schools to teach sex education. Oklahoma and Alabama, two states with the highest teen pregnancy rates, don't require any sex ed. And few states really take a critical look at sexuality and the ways kids encounter it through though TV shows, movies, and yes, even pornography. It's like taking a child to a water park without teaching them how to swim. This leaves the ball in the parents' court. A recent survey from Planned Parenthood shows that 80% of parents are willing to have the talk with their kids. But in order for these conversations to have real meaning, parents need to understand just how much sexual exposure their kids are getting daily and how soon they need to overcome the desire to lecture. That kids need to understand that the conversation is less about rules and more about guidance. As for this, while having a conversation about is usually a private matter. Perhaps it's time to fully embrace the power of the 21st century communication and direct it toward public health goals more deliberately, wrote Strasburger and Sarah Brown, the CEO of the National Campaign to Prevent Teen and Unplanned Pregnancy. In a July report, online material and social media could help fill the gaps in sex education and support many young people. Websites like bedsider.org, developed by Brown's group, offer easy to understand facts about contraception, open minded and legitimate ways, as do other websites like stayteen.org, GoAskAlice, and Sex. For reaching teenagers right where they gather, it's hard to beat YouTube. Laci Green has made a name for herself by providing frank, funny, for herself producing frank and funny videos that answer common questions young people have and dispel myths. Her approach is for everyone. Of her more popular episodes, You Can't Pop Your Cherry, Hyman 101, and Sex Objects BS. Texting has also provided surprisingly useful tool. Some health departments and community groups like California and North Carolina have established services where teens can text their sex-related questions to a number and receive a texted response in 24 hours, allowing for anonymity. Planned Parenthood offers a chat text program where teens and young adults can live, text, or chat with Planned Parenthood staffer. Since the launch in May this year, there's been a total of 393,000 conversations. Should parents really cede sex education to the digital realm? Giving an incredibly high number of young people go to the internet for information on sex anyway, directing them to quality material that appeals to their age range might be one of the better ways to circumvent poor education at school. Showing kids a reliable website can replace a good conversation, can't replace a good conversation, but it can complement one. In Fremont, parents are supplementing their children's sex education in different ways. I don't rely on the school to teach sex ed to my children, says Topham. I told my kids about sex when they were in third grade, and I opened up to dialogue at one point when we were teaching movies together or discussing current events that may touch this topic. We talked about it. Not all parents are prepared to go as far as Topham. Her 5 kids did not get a smartphone until they were 18. They can't have TV or computers in their bedrooms. You can be the best kid possible, but I don't want you to have porn in your pocket, she says. To some, their views may seem extreme, but when it comes to sex ed, Topham decided it's better not to take chances. In the age of innocence. Versus the internet. Some parents don't go down without a fight. I've never learned how to have safe sex. I'm sure that I had a few health classes that talked about condoms and rattled off a lot of facts about scary diseases I might get if I did the wrong thing with the wrong person, but no one ever mentioned what to do if I wasn't having sex with a boy. I didn't know if I was supposed to protect myself, and if I was, I had never heard of any ways in which I could do so. My parents didn't know that I was gay until after I was sexually active. I didn't think or ever consider talking to me about having safe gay sex, said Kristen. If your kid has recently come out to you as a lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or queer, there's a choice that might feel a bit like a deer in headlights. Then it comes approaching with them for tips on safe sex. Between 1991 and 2010, the average age of coming out dropped dramatically from 25 to 16, which means many young people have already come out at the time their parents started talking with them about sex. Finding out how to talk to your LBGTQ kid about safe sex is much, much easier than you think. The more you know, the more open you can be with your child, and the more open you can be about sex, the easier it becomes to talk to your kid or talk to you about their question and concerns. Here are the 3 points to remember. The earlier you start talking to your kids, the easier things will be for you later in the game. According to global recognized sex expert Dr. Justin Shuey, the most popular thing you can do to accomplish is become an askable parent. She says, this does not mean you have to have all the answers, or that you need to be comfortable talking to your child about everything, or telling them what to do sexually. Just that you are approachable. If you don't know an answer, research it or look for reliable and factually accurate sources with your child. When I teach educators, I teach them to first say good question, Shui explains. That is your moment to think about your answer before you laugh or blurt out something silly or negative. Before you start looking for resources to answer your question, it's helpful to address the many misconceptions surrounding LGBTQ community. First, your child isn't going to have any more sex than their classmates. Our identities do not shape our personalities or our interest in sex. Second, they face the same risk. Fluids are fluids are fluids. Sexually transmitted infections can happen to any sexually active human being on the planet. Lastly, there's no such thing as gay sex acts. There are sex acts that are shared between people of all genders, and the way we keep ourselves safe is always in the same. Inform yourself about the ways to be safe when engaging in oral sex. And sex with toys. Newsflash. These are sexual acts that any person may engage in. So even if your kid doesn't identify as LGBT, they still need to be informed. We all have our own relationship to sex, and we also have our own relationship to our children. You know your kid, and you know yourself, so don't feel as though there's only one way to exchange this information. The sex talk doesn't, and mostly shouldn't, have a one-on-one long conversation held at the dinner table. It can be something that evolves over time, perhaps in a letter or over the course of several smaller discussions. Prepare yourself for information and communicate in the ways you think will bring the highest level of comfort for both you and your child. Sometimes this means having to talk without actually talking. Oluremi, an out 18-year-old who we spoke to while researching our book, says her mother took a different route that than most when approaching safe sex. Luckily, my mom understood that I wasn't really one for talking, but knew I would read anything she put in front of me. She said, Oluremi's mom communicated most of her thoughts on safe sex with her daughter through an email, which she knew would make the exchange of information easier. Just like Oluremi's mom, you can send your kid an email if that's easier, or hand them a copy. This is a book's parent on for gay kids with safe sex. Chapter bookmark, shameless plug alert, or talk to them about your feelings on sex as much as you are both comfortable, and then tell them to check out some of the websites listed in the main story. You can even make them read this article. The point is, you have the option, you know, to approach a topic with your kid. When all this is said and done, familiarizing yourself with the resources available and making them available to your kid is a critical part of the sex talk puzzle. Be prepared in case your kid doesn't feel comfortable to talk and ask you questions, even if that means it's just knowing where to point them to when they have the answers. Many teens say, and when they listen to their parents more than anyone else when it comes to practicing safe sex, when you say matters, what you say matters, and what you don't say can matter even more. What kids should know at what age, as a parent, it can be tricky to know when to have the talk and how much you should bring up with your kids at what time. National sexual education standards suggest that by the end of the second grade, kids should know the proper names for male and female body parts and should know that all people have the right to tell others not to touch their body when they don't want to be touched. By the end of the fifth grade, they should be able to define the process of human reproduction, should be able to describe puberty, and how friends, family, media, and society and culture can influence ideas about body image. By the end of the eighth grade, kids should be able to explain the health benefits, risks, and effectiveness rates of various methods of contraception, including abstinence and condoms, and should know how alcohol and drugs can influence sexual decisions. By the end of the 12th grade, students should know about, communicate decisions about whether and when to engage in sexual behaviors and understand why using tricks, threats, or coercion in a relationship is wrong. For more detailed information, click on the link above. Websites, Common Sense Media. Listeners, I was prepared to read twice this much. I was surprised that the Time magazine article was so long, and as it turns out, it wasn't. Just the way I printed it. The rest of it was references. I'm going to make an attempt on Twitter to see if I can get some voices on open mic. All right, listeners, I put one more tweet to invite people here. I'm trying to temper and choose the right words. I don't expect anyone to join me here. Well, why am I delaying and putting a link? Well, that's a good question. I can't answer it precisely. I will say this Time magazine article struck me as important. This idea about teaching kids about handling some of these difficult questions. Like, what do you do if your friend tells you he or she is gay? A teenager, handling that, or he or she is gay. Uh, how to say no, when to say no. Some of these things about the sexting, it's just absolutely um, crazy that our sex education hasn't advanced and become more practical for Rihanna and Beyoncé as the two examples mentioned in the piece. And then finally, there's this. As a middle aged man, it occurs to me that the disasters with sex happen with middle aged men and usually with middle aged women, but sometimes younger women. Um, Elliot Spitzer is a famous one. Arnold Schwarzenegger is another super famous one. Um, the Latino pop star, extraordinarily handsome. He comes out, he's gay. Like most people close to him knew it, but his fans didn't. And so here's a Ricky Martin. I hope I have that name right. If I'm speaking of Ricky Martin and Ricky Martin is not out, then I'm wrong. But I think it's Ricky Martin. He has a book called Yo, which is not yo, like you say in Philadelphia. It's yo, like you would say in Spanish, like I or me. So Ricky Martin, comes out. Hey, this is great, Ricky. Ricky, you're like 35 years old, maybe 40. And this article says that they used to come out at 24, and now they're coming out at 15. Well, Ricky, you're in the entertainment business. Why 35, 40, 45, whatever you are? I mean, I've known Ricky Martin as a successful entertainer for a long time. So why didn't he come out sooner? I don't know. And then just the sex disasters from uh, Ashley Madison. This website has an extraordinarily high number of Americans on the website. So they're supposedly in a monogamous relationship. They're supposedly in a committed relationship, whether married or a living together, sometime committed, at least monogamous, believed by some, and yet they're on Ashley Madison surfing for extra relationship sex. The numbers are so extraordinarily high that this Time magazine article doesn't seem to cover enough. We're so worried about teaching kids, and obviously this article highlights in so many ways that it's necessary, but it's like, don't stop. Obviously, you got to stop teaching, but don't stop learning. I mean, why was Arnold Schwarzenegger such a fool to decide to have sex with his housekeeper? And then he went further and had the child that was produced from that sex get a birth certificate with a father's name on it that was not the father. This is uh, such gross immaturity about sex that it shows that some of the practical things that kids are doing wrong without being proper guidance is only the beginning of it. We keep fucking up. Elliot Spitzer, God, he destroyed his career. Arnold certainly didn't destroy his career. His career is a little more durable, like the Donalds. Arnold can seem to um, act his way out of any problem he gets himself into. Elliot Spitzer wasn't so lucky. So his political career came crashing down, although his career in media has got to be less satisfying, though it is no doubt successful. Um, anyway, so the Time magazine article struck me as important, and I decided this time to, in addition to reading it, I would open it up to open mic. So I will. I think I enjoyed this, even though I'm the only one on open mic. It's been Tom Duty, middle-aged American living in New Jersey near the Lincoln Tunnel. If you were to visit my website, you type Howdy Doody into Google, you'll find the correct spelling of this famous puppet. You then combine Tom Duty in a Google search for my site. Thank you for listening. Have a good day, good evening, a restful night's sleep. Ciao.